Wala akong lingaw. Wala akong lingaw. So, let's do this. Okay, so teka, ang dami na, ang dami nag-PPM. Alam mo yun, yung kung kailan ka magla-live, saka naman dadami yung mag-PPM, ano? Ayan na. Dami talaga nag-PPM. Naririnig ba ako? I hope naririnig ako. So, yun nga, medyo dumadami na rin yung mga nag-PPM sa akin na nagtatanong regarding sa paggawa nga ng flowchart, ano? Kasi isa ito sa mga task na naging project na dito sa ating division. So, a number of our teachers still has this parang confusion and they aren't able to create a good presentation of their flowcharts in their paper. So, marami na rin yung nag-PM, naisip ko, alangan isa-isa ko silang sasagutin. So, kakapagod din yun. And I've assisted a number of teachers as well on how to make their flowcharts a lot better. And mga sa tingin ko para mas magiging madali yung flowchart nila, nung pwede nilang gawin. So, I hope na nakatulong din ako dun sa kanila. Pero yun nga, iniisip ko na isahin na lang siya sa pagsagot para yung mga mag-PPM na naman sa akin ulit, dito na lang sa video tumingin. Dito na lang kayo. Wag na mag-PM para hindi na paulit-ulit. So, gumawa ko ng presentation on how to create flowcharts. Understand it. First and foremost, understand flowcharts. And then, how to create one. And then, after that, maybe improve it in the most efficient way possible without indulging into the technicalities of a flowchart within the context of parang a broader scope, So there are not just a dozen, a million ways of creating a flowchart, but there are certain guidelines on how to make one. And when I was with the National Reading Program, when we were crafting the policy of the National Reading Program, we created a number of flowcharts that would illustrate the processes involved within the policy and how to conduct, deliver the program itself, the policy and how it will be administered in the field. So, the first time I created the flowchart na sinabit ko sa kanila, so yun nga, meron silang mga comments kung how to improve the flowchart as well. And then, dun ko rin nalaman na meron palang mga certain guidelines na sinusunod si Central Office, si DepEd Central Office, on how to create a flowchart. So, dun lang, na-orient ako kung ano yung guidelines na ginagamit nila. So, following these certain guidelines will be the same process, will be the same standards that I will be sharing to all of you tonight para yung basics lang niya para maintindihan ninyo kung paano gagawa ng flowchart and paano siya i-improve na magagamit niyo sa sa inyong mga papers, and also kumbaga address some common misconceptions na nakita ko sa mga flowcharts na pinakita sa akin kung ano daw pwedeng kung maitulong to improve it, etc. etc. So I created a presentation for that. So I hopefully maintindihan natin yun, no? So, let's start with our presentation. So, I call this presentation the Flowchart 2.0. So, tinawag ko siyang 2.0 kasi it is different from the standard flowcharts na makikita natin sa mga iba't ibang businesses and corporations kasi sa kanila mostly ginagamit ito. And then, siguro introduction na rin kung ano ba talaga yung flowchart, no? So, the objectives of this presentation is first to be able to understand the purpose and the components of the flowchart. So, yung bakit ka gagawa ng flowchart and ano ba yung laman ng flowchart. And then, we have to learn how to create basic flowcharts to represent a process coming from a sample lesson plan or teaching delivery. Kasi nga, nasa educational setting tayo. So, paano mo i-apply yung kung nalaman mong mga information and knowledge about flowcharts in your own setting. So, alam nga naman, useless din pala. Kung alam mo naman, di mo naman magagamit. Kaya nga sabi ni Marcel, learning is only evident when there is a change in behavior. So, yun nga yung ano natin, no? So, second, we have to follow the key terms. Yung mga key terms na ginagamit natin when we are creating flowcharts. And I will be explaining so on later on kung ano ba itong mga parts or components ng flowchart. This will be the two basic key terms na gagamitin natin. First, the process, which is the series of actions or steps taken to achieve a particular result. So, understandable naman siguro yun, no? And of course, what is a flowchart? A flowchart is basically a diagram that represents the sequence of steps in a process. So, yung first, using standardized symbols. So, when we say standardized symbols, the keyword there is standardized. Ito yung universally accepted na mga symbols na ginagamit sa flowcharts all throughout different fields of expertise or knowledge. So, to begin with, when we are designing elements of a flowchart, meron tatlo. Tatlo lang talaga yan na makikita mo dyan. The text, the shapes, and the lines. So, every flowchart, tatlo lang talaga yung laman yan. Text, shapes, lines. So, anything other than that, hindi na yun siya part ng flowchart. So, kung magdadagdag ka ng icon, symbols, etc., etc., hindi siya part ng basic design element ng flowchart. It will be anything that is not part of the design. These three are additions and or distractions. When we say distractions, it will destroy your flowchart when it comes to how it should be presented or illustrated. So, mas nagiging pagulo na lang siya sa yung simple sana na process of illustration of the certain steps or procedures na gusto mo sanang i-illustrate sa paper mo. First part, the text. The text should be readable. When we say readable, the text fonts must be consistent and sizes must be readable. It means na kung ang ginamit mong font sa flowchart mo Times New Roman, then all throughout sa flowchart mo, you will be using Times New Roman. Kasi may mga instances na kasi sa ibang symbol, iba na naman yung gagamitin na font, akala siguro nila, kasi design yun. No, hindi major component ng flowchart ang tinatawag nating artistry. And artistry is a part of your expression. But it is not part of the flowchart per se kasi mas lalong nagugulo yung involvement ng iba't ibang fonts. And then there are certain instances na hindi magiging uniform yung sizes ng fonts simply because yung total number of characters sa text mo will be different. So, merong instances when a certain design element will have a smaller font or a bigger font. Nonetheless, ang importante doon, readable siya and it is the same font that is used all throughout your presentation of your flowchart. So, the next part will be the shapes o yung mga symbols na ginagamit natin. The shapes should be consistent and appropriate. What does it mean? Each shape must have a distinct each shape has a distinct purpose and use, and I will be showing that later on. So, do not misuse a certain shape for a certain step. So yun yung madalas na nakikita ko na error sa flowcharts. They are using a certain shape, pero yung text na nagre-represent sa shape na yon is not the same one that should have been placed in that particular step. It could either be mali yung ginawa na step or mali yung ginamit na shape for illustrating that particular step. Second, the shape must be the same in terms of sizes and spacing sa pagkakagawa mo ng flowchart mo. Bakit? Kasi as a design element, hindi po pwedeng inconsistent yung laki ng or sizes ng shapes mo. Yung example, yung rectangle mo, hindi kasing laki ng rectangle sa pangalawa or hindi rin kasing laki sa rectangle ng pangatlo. Iba-iba yung laki nila, yung sizes nila. May maliit, may small, medium, large. So, that's one thing na nakikita ko na erroneous sa paggawa ng flowchart. Second, kung yung size ng rectangle mo, yung haba niya, pagpalagay natin 13 pixels. So, yung parallelogram mo should also be 13 pixels, yung width niya. Dapat consistent siya all throughout. Bakit? Because consistency and uniformity allows your representation of your flowchart more professional and more presentable. So, kung may maliit, may malaki, iba-iba yung sizes niya. Remember, when there are different sizes of shapes, it actually means, or you are trying to say that particular shape has less value or greater value. So, mayroon siyang greater importance or lesser importance. Yun yung ibig sabihin. Kaya nga, kapag magta-type ka ng mga paragraphs, di ba mayroong naka-bold na mga text, it emphasizes na you should be taking note of that particular text or particular word. Kaya siya naka-bold. Magiging ganun ang representation ng flowchart mo kapag hindi magkakapareho yung sizes ng mga shapes. And then, your shapes must also have the same outlines and are aligned uniformly. Which means, kung maglalagay ka ng mga borders, yung margins ng bawat shapes mo, in between the left and the right, top and bottom, dapat uniform yun po siya. And then, yung alignment niya, dapat, titake note niyo po yun. Hindi po pwede na, ito medyo nasa upper part, yung ito medyo nasa lower part, etc. etc. So, ang nangyayari, hindi nakalinya. Yung parang crooked yung flowchart mo. Flowchart nga siya, kaya nga siya tinawag na flowchart kasi it should be flowing, you know? Alam mo yun? It should be flowing. Maganda yung flow niya, kaya siya tinawag na flowchart. So, next, lines. Lines should present a clear direction without overlapping. Lines must demonstrate a clear direction. Ibig sabihin, if it is pointing towards to the left, it should be pointing towards to the left. Hindi po pwedeng meron kang curved na arrow or line sa presentation mo. Hindi yun siya po pwede. And then, do not create lines that intersect with each other. Kasi yung isang step mo papunta sa left, yung isang step mo papunta sa right, and then nag-intersect na silang dalawa, parang may X na yung ano mo, yung flowchart mo. Hindi po pwede po yung ganon. So, make sure na hindi nag-overlap or nag-intersect yung mga lines mo. And then, return lines must be placed either below, if horizontal, yung pag-design mo sa kanya, or to the left, kung vertical naman yung pagkakadesign mo sa kanya. Ang ibig ko sabihin nun, mayroong mga return lines kasi, especially when you are when you are using decision-making steps. So, possible na it would proceed or it would go back to a previous step, yung yung decision-making step mo. When it is returning back, kapag yung design mo horizontal, meaning pahiga, yung return line mo, huwag mo ilagay sa taas. Dapat nasa baba siya. Ibig sabihin nun, kasi usually kasi kapag horizontal yung pagkakagawa mo sa kanya, yung arrows mo or yung lines mo, it will always be within the middle or on the top. Na ang ibig sabihin niya, it's still flowing to the same direction. Kapag vertical naman, ang ibig sabihin nun, patayo yung design mo, kadalasan kasi kapag patayo siyang ganyan, patayo nga siya pero yung process niya to the left from left to right pa rin. So dapat yung nasa back part ng return is nasa left side pa rin yung return lines niya. Yun yung ibig sabihin. I hope I'm making sense. Kumbaga kasi nakapatayo siya, di ba? Kasi portrait yung flowchart mo, yun yung ibig sabihin ng vertical. Kasi portrait siya, so kung mayroon kang return line, pabalik, so kasi nakapatayo siya, to the left siya, parang ganun. Next, these are the basic geometric shapes and symbols that are commonly, ulitin ko these are the basic and most common shapes that are used in a flowchart. Itong anim na ito ang pinaka-common sa lahat. Meron pang iba. Ulitin ko, meron pang iba. Pero sa mga nakita ko pong flowcharts, and then generic din kasi yung ating ginagawa na flowchart, ito pong anim na to, kapag po nandito na po yung anim na to, okay na yung flowchart nyo. Basta po, alam nyo po yung anim. Una yung terminator. Pangalawa, yung process. Pangatlo, yung alternate process. And then yung pang-apat, yung data, yung decision, and then of course, yung document. Each of these shape or symbol or geometric design has its own purpose. Yun po yung na-mention natin kanina. Meron po siyang purpose. May dahilan kung bakit natin yan siya ginagamit. So, hindi pa pwede na sabihin nyo po na, ito, parang maganda to, ito yung gamitin ko, etc. etc. Hindi pa pwede yon na, basta feel ko lang, gamitin ko itong diamond symbol. No. Meron siyang purpose. Merong reason why you will be doing that or using that particular design. So, to discuss one by one, let's go first with the terminator. The terminator represents the start or end of a process. So, it could be the beginning or it could be the end. Yan ang ibig sabihin nun. So, kapag ginagamit po ito siya, it doesn't necessarily mean na start and end lang. Ito yung start, ito yung beginning, ito yung ending. So, dalawa lang dapat yung flowchart ko. Pwede pong merong flowchart sa gitna for terminator. Pwede po yun kung ang particular step na po yun under the decision making, wala na talagang mapupuntahan. Kumbaga, terminate the process. Parang ibig sabihin ng ganun. Pwede po yun. Pero sa educational setting, rare masyado na meron tayong terminator in between our flowchart. So, most likely, most often than not, nasa beginning and end po talaga siya. Dalawa ang ating shapes. And then, the second one would be the process. The process is the rectangular shape na ginagamit natin sa flowchart, which indicates a set of operations or actions that are performed. Ito yung generic na process. It shows steps that involve handling or transforming data. Ito po yung keyword natin, handling or transforming data. Ibig po sabihin nito, ito po yung generic na processes that are involved in your flowchart. Ito talaga yung common na ginalagay natin. Ito yung siyang ginagamit. So, kapag meron ka pang step na gagamitin, commonly, it could be a process. But, pwede rin siya maging alternate process or data or document. Pero, usually, process po talaga siya. Malalaman lang natin kapag hindi siya process, kapag maintindihan na natin yung ibang shapes. So, the third part would be the alternate process. Ito po yung rectangle, pero yung curved yung edges niya. Ano? It denotes a process that deviates from the standard procedure. Ibig po sabihin nito, kapag sa decision-making step po ninyo, you did not anticipate the flow of your presentation to go towards that particular procedure, meron ka dapat alternate process. Ito po siyang ginagamit. It is used for steps that are not part of the main sequence but are alternative options. Yun po yung keyword, alternate. And then data. Ito yung kadalasan na kasama ng process na ginagamit natin na shape. It signifies input or output from a process. It represents information entering or leaving the system such as user responses or documents. Ibig sabihin po nito, ito po yung nilalagay natin kapag pong merong involved na, sa process natin, meron pong involved na input or output from a process. So, meron kang process, pero merong input within it or merong output within it. So, yun pong step na yun po yung tinatawag nating data symbol. Doon po natin ilalagay yung particular step na po yun. And then, we have the decision making, which is used for decision making where the outcome typically is a yes or no response. So, kadalasan sa educational setting, yes and no lang yung nasa decision making. But there are also other certain circumstances where in the decision making would that be yes or no. It could be a different process involved na gagamitin natin. Yun yung ginagamit na alternate process. It could be A, it could be going to set A, or it could be going to set B. Pwedeng ganun yung magiging procedure ng ating flowchart. So, pero sa educational setting and sa mga flowcharts na nakita ko from their papers na nabasa ko, most often, yes or no yung ginagamit nila ng decision making na symbol is yes and no. So, ganun lang po. And then the document. It illustrates the generation or use of a document or report. Indicates the document is to be created or referred to in that particular step. Ibig po sabihin nito, ginagamit itong step na ito kapag po merong ibibigay na hard copy. Kaya, document nga hard copy or soft copy na kailangang i-fill out within that set of particular processes. Kaya po ginagamit yan siya. So, meron talagang mangyayaring operation within it using that particular step. Magbibigay ka ng instruction that they will be okay, example, the students will be completing the fact sheets that will be distributed to them. So yun po, that particular step is actually should be using the document shape or symbol. So yun po ang ginagamit natin na anim, no? Ulitin natin, we have the terminator, the process, the alternate process, the data, the decision making, and the document shape, no? Yan po yung anim na ginagamit natin na mga shapes for our flowchart. Yan po yung basic, yan na po pinaka-basic sa lahat. And then, following that, we'll be presenting the basic flowchart for a science lesson on photosynthesis. So, naghanap ako ng lesson plan sa internet. Okay, math major po ako, so ayoko kasi na math yung gagamitin na lesson kasi parang redundant na masyado, kasi sa service, puro math na lang. So, yun. So, I tried something else na away from my comfort zone. So, try natin science, no? So, I tried science, this one. So, anyway, flowchart naman yung gagawin hindi naman talaga yung lesson So, yung flow lang ng delivery ng lesson yung gagawin natin. So, that's what, that's the purpose na ano natin. So, sa presentation. So, I will be presenting to you a flowchart that I designed a while ago for a science lesson on photosynthesis. Kape muna po tayo. Shoutouts po sa Coffee ko 3-in-1. Baka gusto nyo po kong sponsor o kaya may mag-sponsor dyan ng kape sa akin. 3-in-1 lang po, fights na. Pero po kung sa labas nyo po kayo ililibre, Starbucks po, mocha frap, venti. Extra, whole wheat yung milk. Okay, let's proceed. So, your flowchart will ultimately begin with what? With the start, the terminator. You will begin with the terminator. So you will start with the symbol that would tell everyone na dito magsisimula yung flowchart. So pwede pong hindi start yung nakalagay diyan. Pwede po. Pwede po hindi start yung nakalagay diyan. Pwede nga nakalagay diyan the teacher will will greet the students with their routinary activities. Pwedeng ganon. So that indicates na that is the start of your flowchart. Basta yan yung gamit nyo na symbol. Okay? And then following that, we'll be going with the next step, which is the objective setting. Notice na yung ginamit natin na shape will be the rectangle. Kasi nga, it's just a process. Yan po yung process natin. After the objective setting, nag-change yung shape natin. We will be gather materials. So, bakit data yung ginamit na shape? Kasi gathering of materials is not specifically an information that would change the process within the goal of your flowchart. So, it's an input and an output. This is actually inputting. Nag-i-input si ma'am ng mga materials that will be used for his or her conduct of your lesson. So after that, you will provide another input sa mga bata, which is a pre-assessment. So po pwede magkakaroon ka ng pre-test. And then after that, you will be presenting your presentation, meaning the discussion proper of your lesson. So that is another step entirely. That begins another phase of your lesson. So from objective setting, you will now go to the presentation. So another stage na naman ito ng lesson. So yung ginamit natin na shape will be the rectangle. And then before you will be proceeding with the next step, you will have a decision making step, which is do students understand photosynthesis? So yun yung decision making step mo. It could either be answered by yes or no. So merong dalawang maaaring mangyari. Yun yung purpose ng decision making. Two possible outcomes. It could be yes, it could be no. Anong mangyayari if yes ang sagot sa tanong na to? Anong mangyayari kung no ang sagot sa tanong na to? Kapag no ang sagot, babalik sa presentation. Ibig sabihin nun, i-explain ulit ni ma'am yung kanyang discussion proper yung introduction proper ng kanyang lesson until masasagot yung decision making step na do students understand photosynthesis will be yes. So hanggat hindi po ma-achieve yung yes, hindi magpo-proceed sa next process. Paulit-ulit po ang itong ating magiging I don't know if you can see my mouse. Paulit-ulit po itong particular process na to, magiging cyclical itong part na ito. Kapag hanggat hindi na-achieve yung yes na sagot. And then after that, if ma-achieve na yung yes, then the teacher could go to the demonstration and then he or she will conduct the practice, meaning magkakaroon siya ng activity, and then the next part will be preparing handouts. O ito po yung handout na ito, naka-document na po yung ginamit natin na symbol. Kasi may ibibigay na document, may file na ibibigay. Yan po yung handout. So yun po ang gagamitin ng mga bata. Ito po ang ibibigay ng teacher. So ang nakalagay po dyan, document na symbol, ang ibig sabihin po na nito, meron talagang ibibigay na existing na copy. And then after that, you will be proceeding to the assessment. Notice na yung assessment natin, data yung ginamit na symbol. Kasi nga, it's another input. Input siya sa end ng teacher, pero output siya sa end ng student. Ito yung magiging parang representation ng mga bata sa kanilang intindihan sa yung lesson. So, yun yung output nila. So, sa yung part, that will be an input on your part. Okay, makikita, ito yung magiging input from first data ko. First-hand data ko to siya na magagamit ko that I could be using or I could use in the future for feedbacking or for reflection, etc., etc. And then after that, ito na nga, feedback. Kakasabi ko lang, feedback. After that, feedbacking, maaaring ang feedback, si ma'am magbibigay ng feedback based on the assessment results, or yung mga bata magbibigay ng feedback kung how did they found the lesson, kung naiintindihan ba nila o wala, etc., etc. And then of course, summary, magbibigay ng generalization si ma'am, and it will ultimately be the end of your lesson. So ganyan lang, napaka-simple lang. That is a basic flowchart. Notice na madali lang intindihin. It will go to start, and then objective setting, and then etc., etc., hanggang sa darating ka sa end na step. So after that, it basically tells your viewer or your reader na okay, ito lang pala yung gagawin. Ito lang yung gagawin ni teacher. Now, asan yung problema dito? The problem here is actually this one. Ito yung nakikita ko na problem parate. When you look at the flowcharts, kapag ganyan kasi, this is just one step before, one step forward and one step back. Ibig sabihin nun, during the time na magkakaroon ng decision-making step si ma'am, sa yes or no, kapag ang sagot sa kanyang tanong sa decision-making step niya is actually no, ang mangyayari pala, babalik lang siya one step backward, which is presentation. Ito yung issue. Kung sa first presentation nga ni ma'am, hindi naging effective, kaya ang naging result is no, babalik na naman tayo doon. Kung the first time nga, it did not do well, what makes you think na when you're going to repeat it, it will now do well? Kaya nga sinabi nila, insanity is what? Insanity is repeating the same thing, expecting a different result. Di ba? Yun yung sinabi nila. That was actually quoted by people na from Einstein daw. They assume it came from Einstein. That insanity is repeating the same step or repeating the same thing, expecting a different result. Ito yung mangyayari dyan. When it's no, one step backward, presentation, and then check. Nasabtan na, wala. Wala, gapon. Oh, so balik ka pagkas-present. So dyan na lang ka permanente. So what will the teacher do if hindi ma-achieve yung yes? Diba? Nakita nyo po yung problem sa ganitong flowchart. And madalas ko po itong nakikita sa mga flowchart na pina-check sa akin, na pinakita sa akin. Yan, sinasabi ko sa kanila, ma'am, ano po mangyayari, ma'am, kapag po parating madalas sagot is no? Ay, hindi po, sir. Hindi po, ano po, ganito. Hindi naman ganun, sir. Kapag na-re-explain na po kasi ulit yung presentation, sir, naiintindihan ng mga bata. Yes! Si Telis Peribus, with all things being equal, in a perfect world, palagay natin, what if nga, hindi pa rin na-gets ng bata? Kasi kung math ito, pagturo mo ulit, did you understand, class? Nalibog mo, wala. Libog pa, sir. O, karon. So, imong ibalik kong tudlo. Pag tudlo ni mo usab, libog lang gyapon daw. Kasi mong buhaton. What will you do? Especially kapag math yung itinuturo mo. What will you do? See, there should be a step that would reroute a possible direction in order to achieve the yes result in the decision-making step. So, kaya po tinawag kong Flowchart 2.0 ito kasi ito po yung madalas na nakikita ko sa mga flowcharts na pina-check sa akin and how it could be resolved. So, let's revise it. Gawa tayo ng revision. So, let's revise the flowchart. This is the revised flowchart for a science lesson on photosynthesis. Same thing, ganun pa rin. Start, objective setting, gather materials, pre-assessment, presentation. And then after that, the dreaded, do the students understand photosynthesis? Yes and no. O, ngayon, yung problem natin kanina, kapag no yung sagot, babalik si ma'am saan? Sa presentation. Babalik siya ulit sa presentation. So, sinabi ko kanina, that is problematic kapag paulit-ulit na ganyan, ang mangyayari, hindi makaka-push through si ma'am sa yes kapag ang lesson hindi talaga naintindihan ng mga bata with that prepared presentation ni ma'am. Dapat meron siyang alternate presentation. Meron siyang alternative steps that could achieve the yes possible result in the decision-making step. So, tatanggalin natin yan. Huwag tayong pumunta sa presentation. Instead, we will create an alternative or alternate step or process. Ito yung tinatawag natin na split path sa flowchart. Split path. Bakit? Hindi siya originally part ng flowchart. But it is a split path that will only be achieved if the result of the decision-making step is a no. So, ang mangyayari niyan, there will be a review of the presentation and then an interactive Q&A, and then group activity, and then reassessment. Bakit mayroong reassessment? Kasi it will determine if the students were able to understand the topic or photosynthesis in this case in a yes or no criteria. So, kung makikita po ninyo, 4 yung nilagay natin na process. Bakit? To ensure that the presentation or the processes involved in achieving the yes result in your decision-making step will be achieved regardless of having the presentation originally na ginamit natin sa ating flowchart. So there's an alternative path. Yung tinatawag natin na split path sa ating flowchart. So kung makikita po niyo yung direction niya, so babalik pa rin siya sa decision-making. Pero yung cycle niya will not involve the previous step na one step backward lang. Na the teacher is not just, parang tawag nito, hindi siya close-minded sa iisang possible lang na backup move. So, meron talaga siyang alternate. Ito yung gagawin ko. Kapag hindi pa maintindihan, ito yung gagawin ko. Or ito na naman yung gagawin ko. Kasi hindi po natin sinabi dito na the review presentation, the interactive Q&A, the group activity will only be a single step or a single process involved. Hindi po ganun yung ating sa kanya, understanding sa kanya. It could be repeated over and over. For as long as may bala pa si ma'am to provide for an interactive Q&A or a group activity. So, yun yung niyan. If time would allow. So, if hindi naman mag-allow yung time, si ma'am na po ang bahala na mag-adjust. Ito po yung purpose niyan eh. Si ma'am, meron siyang flexibility. And the flowchart can show the flexibility on the part of the moderator or the executioner ng ating flowchart. So, until ma-achieve yung yes na result. So, and then, ma-achieve na yung yes. So, same pa rin dun sa ating flowchart kanina. So, ganun pa rin yung magiging resulta niya. So, it's the same thing. The difference is, main difference niya is, meron tayong alternative path. Yung alternate path niya, that will determine a higher degree of probability to achieve the yes result in your decision-making step. And then another thing na manonotice po ninyo, na our lines, the arrows that we use, are moving from left to right. Pagdating sa pinaka-last, okay, tingin po sa start. Tingin kayo dito sa start hanggang sa presentation. After the presentation, it goes down but still going to the leftmost part. So parang it's the same flow na ginagamit natin kapag nagbabasa tayo ng mga paragraph. Left to right. And then pag natapos na yung linya na yan, left to right ulit. And then left to right ulit. And so on and so forth. Hindi katulad kanina. Kung napansin nyo po kanina, yung direction niya ganyan. Parang zigzag. Di ba? Ito po yung tinatawag nating line consistency. If your flowchart is going to the left, then all of your processes must be going to the left. And then ito po, makikita nyo po sa part na ito, meron din po tayong mga return path. Ito yung return path niya. Yung return path, yung split path niya, nasa baba po parati. Wala tayong ginamit na return path kasi wala naman pong babalikan. Kasi alternate route or split split path yung ginagamit natin dito. So, yan po, no? So, yung movement niya from left to right, kahit bumaba po siya, pabalik pa rin po sa left to right. Hindi po maguguluhan yung mga viewers or audience or readers nyo na ito talaga yung process niya. Left to right, and then pag dumating na sa dulo, left to right ulit, then left to right ulit. Hindi na left, right, left, down, left, right, down. Hindi ganun. Magulo po yun. Okay? Yan po yung ating common na nakikita natin sa ating mga flowcharts na sana mabago natin. So, in summary, so we have flowcharts. What are flowcharts? It's basically a visual representation of a process, etc., etc. So, we already have provided to you that the key elements, there are only 3 key elements in a flowchart in our design, the text, lines, and shapes. And then we have the traditional flowcharts, which we presented to you a while ago, na it is showing you a sample flow of a lesson plan for photosynthesis using basic key elements and basic structure. And then ito pong revised flowchart na ginawa po natin is to be able to provide to everyone a different representation involving the decision-making step. So meron po tayong alternate na step or split path, which is a modification of our flowchart approach na magbibigay po ng additional steps sa ating existing flowchart in order to address the no response in our decision-making result for a more robust representation of your flowchart in achieving the yes result. So, yun po yung objective niya. So, I hope I was able to shed light on understanding flowcharts, how to make it, what are its basic elements, and designing it, etc., etc. Of course, you can provide color. Wala po problema sa colors. Kapag po gusto niyo po maglagay ng iba't ibang kulay sa flowchart ninyo, wala po problema doon. For as long as yung mga kulay na ginamit po natin is consistent. Kunwari po, excuse me, may nagme-message na naman. Ano ba yan? Kunwari po, yung ginamit po natin sa flowchart natin, sa beginning step or sa terminator na step, orange. So, orange din po yung terminator na step. Kung yung process step po natin blue, then blue din po lahat ng mga process steps na involved sa flowchart. Kumbaga, merong singularity in terms of colors and uniformity in terms of the usage of these colors. Yun po yung ating purpose of coloring it. Wala pong standard na kulay para sa paggawa ng flowchart. Kayo na po bahala dyan kung anong kulay ang gusto nyo gamitin. Basta siguraduhin nyo lang po na consistent yung paggamit nyo po ng kulay. Pwede daw bang gamitan ng ang arrows ng kulay? Po, pwede po. Lagyan nyo ng arrow, walang problema. Lagyan nyo ng kulay yung mga arrow ninyo. Kailan daw gagamitin yung dotted or dashed na arrow? Kapag po, usually ginagamit po yan sa alternate path. Kapag po yung input or output ng data po is nag-exist lang po siya for a particular step po, pwede pong wala siya doon. So, pwede po natin gamitin yung mga dashes. Pero, ano siya, parang, it's taboo ba? Parang, frowned upon ang paggamit ng mga dash na mga arrows. But it is not, dash arrows, but it is not bawal. Hindi po siya forbidden ang paggamit nito. For as long as you know why you use it, yun lang po yung ano niya dyan. So, I think I was able to address most of the messages, most of the questions, most of the comments na nakikita ko po sa Facebook and na nare-receive ko po sa Messenger. And sa lahat po ng gumagawa ng flowcharts at nagpapatulong po sa akin, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Sa mga kumontak po sa akin, asking for my inputs and for suggestions po sa kanilang mga trabaho, hindi lang po dito sa paper and even sa mga thesis clients ko po. Maraming po salamat sa inyo sa patuloy po na pagtitiwala at patuloy po na pagsuporta sa ating advokasya dito sa ating Facebook page, sa ating Facebook profile dito sa Meta. Maraming salamat po at magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Muli po, Sir Weds, inyo pong lingkod. Magandang gabi.